we will get started. So thank you for joining our discussion on co-developing strategies to meet this increased demand that we're seeing, looking at the benefits of a phased approach and the power of farmer networks. Okay, so this is our last of our webinar series. My name is India Clark. I work as a Farm and Community Engagement Coordinator for ORCD. I love this job. I farmed for 6 years on a small organic farm. Before that, I did disaster planning with NOAA. So the phased approach of how to kind of look at natural disasters and pandemics is something that we'll be kind of focusing on today with Hunter. So thank you. As we mentioned earlier, we're a growing network of women farmers, and I'm not going to kind of go over our Women Farmers Network too much now because we'd like to get started, but let's delve in. There's been a lot on all of our minds as we try to understand what to plan for and expect during this pandemic. There's been so many of these webinars on this topic. Will we continue to see this demand beyond COVID, and what can we do to encourage our community to continue buying local? That's scratching the surface. We're hoping to go deeper today. So how much to shift and adapt our operations, and where can we find the best type of support and resources to fit our unique needs? So today we're going to look at three main things: the importance of strategy, wrapping our minds around using a phased approach through this, and the power of collaboration. So I'm going to go ahead. We could give more on that, but I'm going to let the panelists really take that on. We do have a full spectrum of interest in our audience I want to acknowledge. So we have small scale producers to large. We have those that are in ag or thinking about getting into it. We have nonprofit kind of supporters, people that are working on our food system. So we do want to ask our panelists to speak to the small to large scale farms so that we can have our attendees really feel that they're being addressed. And attendees, let's also try to use the best use of our panelists' time, and let's try to start asking some questions as the presentations begin. So let's delve in with Dana Shapiro. She's a general manager of the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative. If you guys don't know who they are yet, you should check out their website. It's pretty mind-blowing and exciting. I've been a fan for a long time, so this is great. In 2015, she and her husband, Noah Lincoln, began an ulu farm in Kona, awarded through a Kamehameha School's Mahi'ai matchup contest. In 2016, they joined with 9 farms to form the Hawaii Ulu Cooperative. The co-op has since expanded to 70 to 100 members, growing at least 6 distinct breadfruit varieties and various microclimates. So that enables that co-op of growers to produce and supply ulu virtually year round. The co-op has also built its own processing facility, sold to restaurants and hospitals, and secured a contract to supply Hawaii's public schools. So that's really been a model for all of us. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Dana and let her kind of share where the co-op is today and some of the creative strategies they're using and the benefits that they've seen of being a collaborative of farmers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let Dana take over.
Mahalo, India, and thank you for having me here today. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So as India said, my name is Dana Shapiro. I've been managing the co-op since its inception, and we just turned 4 years old, so that's how old we are. You can go on to the next slide, please. Sorry, my daughter's behind me, and she's 4, so you might hear her chiming in. So I was asked to just provide a brief overview of the co-op and how it functions. So as India mentioned, we've grown from 9 to currently about 85 farmers over the past 4 years. We have 2 members on Maui and the rest are on Hawaii Island, pretty much all districts represented. So the co-op is owned by the growers. That is the basics of the co-op model. And it really enables the farmers to focus on farming by taking on the responsibility of everything up the value chain. We also provide a lot of technical assistance to our growers in a few different forms. including access to trees, bulk fertilizer, and supply purchases, and a few other models that I can talk about if there's interest. So this is just a graph showing our growth to date. So you can see it's a pretty steep growth trajectory. And when we first started, as you can see, we aggregated about 11,000 pounds of ulu, and this last year we did almost 100,000 pounds. No, I don't have any more sticky pads, sorry. And over the next, oh, and I should say we've also in the last year, 2019, we did about 100,000 or about 80,000 pounds of other crops as well. So we have diversified to include other crops in addition to ulu, which is a really, really important part of our business model that we foresee continuing to invest in. So this is essentially our growth projection for the next 6 years. So you can see scaling up to almost 800,000 pounds by 2025. And that's based on our existing members' already planted trees. So this doesn't take into account any growth in membership or additional trees planted. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to continue keeping up with the increasing supply of fresh ulu, and in supporting our farmers to make sure that we hit these targets. Because ulu is a new commercial industry, of course, the crop has been around for many millennia. But in terms of modern production practices, there's a real dearth of agronomic resources and technical support. So we end up filling that gap for our growers. So as India mentioned, we've built up a processing facility. We've been really fortunate in partnering with both the Hawaii Food Basket here on the Big Island and the Department of Agriculture. And the Hawaii Food Basket was the previous tenant of this facility. And I feel that they really shepherded us in when we started, and they were moving out of the facility, and it was built in the early 90s as an ag hub. Really, it was called a marshalling yard, which is sort of an antiquated term for a food hub or an ag hub. And it hadn't ever really been used for that purpose for a complex set of historical reasons. And so the Food Basket, I think, believed in restoring the use of its original intended purpose. And we were able to renegotiate a long-term lease with the state. So we've built out this warehouse. It was more or less an empty warehouse. We've built a commercial kitchen, you know, equipped it and so forth, and are now working on some infrastructure expansions. So our main product line is minimally processed, steamed and frozen ulu, and now a variety of other crops as well. This is really key to why we're able to provide year-round supply. Ulu in and of itself is very much a seasonal crop, even when you bring in different varieties and different microclimates, meaning our geographic diversity of our membership. It's really this minimal processing that enables us to have a consistent year-round inventory. And which I believe is really crucial for Hawaii, not just for ulu, but for other crops as well. So this is a picture of one of our ulu case boxes in a 10-pound weight that's designed for food service. And then of course this Kalua pork, spinach, and ulu wrap was the first way in which the Department of Education served ulu to students. And since then they've been doing an ulu beef stew with local beef and local ulu. And this year, there's a lot of things up in the air. We're not even sure ulu will still be on the menu. If it is, I think it likely won't be in the form of a stew because there'll be a lot of grab and go menu options. So that's essentially our operation. And as I said, we do sort of from farm gate and delivery to our facility, we handle the rest of the value chain for our growers. So when COVID-19 hit, or I should say the response to COVID hit in mid-March, we were very much caught off guard. And I think on the spectrum of how COVID has impacted agriculture, we are definitely on the end of massive impact, because over 95% of our sales went to institutional and commercial food service, which basically stopped buying entirely until very recently. And of course, sales to commercial restaurants are still very precarious because their operations are very precarious. So we had to pivot really hard and really fast. And it was a stressful early few weeks to month of this whole pandemic. But what really saved us is strategic partnerships with the variety of community feeding programs that popped up, the Food Basket, Chef Hui, probably a dozen others, as well as I would say the direct-to-consumer, the pre-existing direct-to-consumer outlets that were really poised to scale their services in response to COVID, such as FarmLink. On the Big Island, the Keauhou Farmers Market was very quick to go online, and that ended up being an important sales channel for us. But because we've been working with food service really since the beginning, it's been really challenging for us to shift, for instance, our whole pack size. Our packaging and our labeling and our branding was all very focused on food service. And so that is not an overnight transition to the home consumer. And we're still very much in the process, I think, of making the shift. We're actually working on redoing our website, really changing up a lot of our marketing strategy, including our online marketing strategy. And so I feel that we're really still learning and working through this. Oh, and this is just some pictures of some of the things we've done. So we launched Csa Boxes. We're about to launch a smaller version of them that will be quite a bit cheaper. So again, we tried to make our food service sizes just available for the home user, but for most home users, they can't fit 20 pounds of ulu in their freezer at once. So we have more work to do, including just designing smaller size packaging for all of our different crops. And I was asked to provide some tips for the audience. So I just sort of threw this together. I'm I don't know, multi-generation co-op member, I guess. So I come with a very clear bias toward co-ops and collective action. But I think if anything, our model shows that we all benefit when we can find common needs and values and find a way to create new services that respond to those. I think finding your particular aligned partners, which might not be my particular aligned partners, but will ultimately help you reach your goals. And finally, this is something we're still really working on, but finding the right way to articulate your value set and your unique value proposition, no matter how, I guess, different that might be from the status quo. I think especially in this COVID world where everything is online, we're all just inundated with online marketing and offers. And so finding, I think the most effective way to stand out is just to be your most authentic self. We're still working on that, but that would be my final tip. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We might have, I think you answered our question really, which I think the two questions that we received from our attendees as they registered was really kind of trying to understand, yes, what are the benefits of kind of collaborating with other farmers, and what we're hearing is that you just need to find who you can align with, who has the same, kind of values and stand out. Do you see kind of any benefits in particular for our Women Farmers Network? This is just kind of throwing it out there, but and maybe you even just spelled it out for us, but you had kind of touched on kind of finding your authentic self and standing out. So are there any kind of, on either the supply side or on the marketing side, or is there any kind of experience that you'd want to share with that? Like,
in terms of something more specific to women with regard to?
Yeah, like could there be an advantage for us? So we are a network of women farmers. We're not a cooperative, but between being an official cooperative and this kind of organization, this informal group of women farmers that share resources, we share inspiration. We can do as much as we want, but we have this in our lap. So how could we advance this network a little more? So, not a formal co-op, but what's that spectrum of kind of something that we could work on together or collaborate on, like?
Well, the basis of what I guess justifies a co-op, and I think supports its long-term viability, is ensuring that it remains relevant to its members, who are its stakeholders. So figuring out what is that common need that sparked the creation of the organization or the movement to begin with, and remaining relevant to that need. And that need might change over time. It evolves, of course. But ultimately, the organization will be as impactful and as long-lived as it is relevant to the needs of its stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Attendees, you can chat informally. You can add a formal question, but thank you so much. That was really insightful. A lot to take in. This webinar will be recorded, so we will be able to play this back over and over again and listen to all of this. So I know you have to leave us today, so we're going to say goodbye. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to welcome our next panelist. So Hunter Heveland is a food system planner at Supersistence. He's a PhD student at UH Manoa. He's looking at Hawaii ag development and food crises over the 20th century. He's currently works as a statewide food resilience coordinator for the Hawaii Public Health Institute. So he's, a lot of us kind of got, as Donna had mentioned, this just took us by surprise, the pandemic, but we're gonna let Hunter kind of share the stuff that he works with and help us kind of look at how you plan for disasters and phases of that. So Hunter, I'll let you go ahead and take over.
Sure, thank you. Sort of the same thing India just said. But yeah, just sort of giving some of the vantage points that I'm coming from as a food systems planner, as a researcher. My research in particular is focused on food crises in Hawaii over the 20th century. So I've kind of been trying to understand ways that Hawaii was impacted and some of the responses to impacts, or to rather disruptions in either our food supply systems or our food demand. And my work now has really been focused on food system resilience across the state, trying to understand from a data perspective the food insecurity being faced by households and communities, where that is, what types of public feeding programming is out there, and what the gap is, and how we can fill that gap with local production. And a lot of that work has been, many of that work, particularly the latter portion, has been aided by my participation in the Agricultural Response and Recovery Working Group, which I'll also touch on. So I just wanted to contextualize kind of what's happening here in this moment with some of what I've learned in my research about what's happened here in the past, right? So what we've seen is this major shift in food provisioning, right? Often when, I think particularly in foodie and agricultural circles, when we talk about food system disruptions, there's this idea that the ships stop coming and that maybe we need to bolster ourselves from that eventuality. But in this instance, it really wasn't so much a supply disruption, but a disruption in where things could be accessed, particularly when our stay-at-home orders went into place and the decreases in, say, hotels, restaurants, and many of the market outlets for farmers were no longer available. And then on the sort of household side, it was a disruption in purchasing power, right? So as folks, mass unemployment, major issues in our unemployment filing system, coming in a timely manner, delays in getting our federal stimulus for folks on unemployment out really impacted people's ability to purchase food, even if it was still on the shelf. While there were temporary disruptions in some cases with minor shortages, that was, I think, largely in part due to say hoarding practices and some of that, more so than just broader disruptions to our production systems, or particularly production systems as part of the global marketplace. One thing that I have seen in looking through the history of food system disruptions, so this is really my research focusing on sort of 1914 to 1918 with World War I. This photo is actually a part of what was called the Banana Consuming Propaganda Committee, which was a ad hoc kind of business interest group. And at that time, we actually exported a lot of bananas, but because of disruptions to shipping and concern over the safety of shipping, that large export crop now became part of something that was just either going to be eaten or get, turned into compost or pig feed here. And so there was a lot of work to try and reintegrate these local foodstuffs into our plates and eventually into our palates. And so from looking in, say, World War I, also there was a maritime strike in the mid-30s on the West Coast that really impacted our food systems. World War II, a dock strike in the late 40s here, really the key time periods I've been trying to learn from. And there are a couple of things that I've kind of seen. And one is that there's often a benefit, at least in the short term, to local agriculture. This sort of knee-jerk response to supporting maybe even a little bit more, whether it's just rhetorically, which is pretty constant. We've been saying we want to increase our local food self-sufficiency for over a century, but there ends up being at least a benefit, a boon in the short term to agricultural markets when the local becomes the default. And in some cases, when these new foods enter the palate, in this instance saying bananas, or in, say, the case of World War II, because the major offshore fishing was operated by Japanese Americans, and concern over surveillance in our portways and our harbors, they shut down all the shipping. And so all this major protein source that was fish then became replaced by Spam. In the case of bananas in World War I, there was a bunch of research done by UH and Extension at the time, trying to integrate local starches to replace flours. And it turned out that bananas and sweet potato, but particularly bananas, was the most popular. And from best I can tell, that was about when banana bread entered the local palate. And similarly in World War II, in that replacement of fish, is when Spam enters the local palate. So there's these things where these disruptions, because it shifts the type of food and where we get food and what types of food we can access, can conceivably have these intergenerational impacts on what we think of as local food and the things that we come to enjoy. As to whether or not this demand surge will persist, I think it depends on a lot of different factors. I mean, tomorrow is effectively the last day of the $600 unemployment stimulus coming from the federal government. I don't think the $100 unemployment top up from the state is quite operational yet. But that's a significant impact to purchasing power. And so while folks have been able to rely on that in some cases to continue purchasing and acquiring local goods, as people transition back to work, the bump that we've seen in food spending on food at home, right, where from some national statistics, a significant jump in food at home spending, cooking at home, and the time, and people just having the time to sort of prepare foods in that way could significantly shift, particularly if we go back into a lockdown, if our growth numbers continue. So we need to be paying attention to sort of the purchasing power and the federal entitlements, or just bundle of entitlements that can enable that, whether it's SNAP and EBT use or unemployment supports. So one of the things that did come up in a lot of my research when one of these disruptions was happening or was forecast was that these committees were formed, whether it was the Territorial Food Commission in World War I or what became the Office of Food Control in World War II. But there were groups that came together, often with some type of government backing, though not the case in this instance, to try and remedy these food system issues. And so myself and many others, Jesse included, came together and created the Agriculture Response and Recovery Working Group, which is a broad coalition bringing together folks from public, private, Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, Department of Ag, federal, state, folks that sort of wear many hats like myself, farmers, to produce a massive sort of policy and recommendation matrix that you can link to there. And after we produced this gigantic collaborative project and sort of started shopping it around and seeing which entities, but both state, when the legislature was going to come back into session, and then now a lot of work continuing with county level advocacy to try and advocate for programming that's going to support local agricultural products to be routed into emergency feeding operations, both in the short term and as well as ideally in the long term, and other mechanisms to ensure that farmers and ranchers are advocated for and receiving some of the CARES funds distributions. Subsequent to that, we produced a workforce development scan, and that's some of the data on the right here, which had about 130 projects submit, seeking around $150 million in funding that would produce about 2,400 new jobs. If you have not participated in that, please do. So that initial recommendation matrix was to some degree tailored to these kind of 3 broad periods of stabilization, which was then part of the Alan Oshima Recovery Navigator, which roughly correlates with some work on the disaster cycle, as it's known, which is just really sort of tracking from preparation to disruption, mitigation, and so forth. So we were following that framework of stabilization, reopening, and recovery and resilience. But I think it's important to recognize when we think about, initially it was really flattening the curve, but we're seeing that curve is coming back somewhat, but we didn't really actually get over the effects of the initial flattening, right? So these aren't necessarily things that we can easily break up into phases all that well. But in looking at some of the responses to these disruptions, we can look particularly to the Paycheck Protection Program, which was the Small Business Administration administered loans that went out, and there were about 350 loans that went to farms and farm-related businesses across the state, totaling between 23 and 41 million. The way they released the data, you can't get all that exact for at least things that were over $150,000. But about 2/3 of that went to crop production. But of interest, there were very specific geographical considerations, right? So Hilo got more money than all of Maui, for example. Kona, similarly. And so there are, part of this just tells us where agriculture happens, but part of it also might be about which communities are better engaged with, say, public or other types of stimulus programming. And if you want to learn more on that, you can go to the link in there on my website, which has way too many slides to ever keep anyone awake. And so sort of finally, in thinking about growing farm resilience and trying to plan with uncertainty, I would definitely advocate for accessing whatever funds you can, right? Whether this is federal loans or stimulus programs, RFPs or grants or loan programs coming out from various counties. It may not be the same as selling at the farmer's market that you were used to, but having those funds in reserve or getting your losses recuperated through some of these grant programs that are specifically tailored to losses faced as a byproduct of COVID is a great way to ensure that you are better able to sustain yourself over the next disruptions, which it seems we're more than likely to be facing again. Getting your projects and your products out there can be another important way, just ensuring that you're broadening the folks that know that your operation is happening. If you haven't already, please go participate in the Ag Response and Recovery Working Group's workforce scan. We are compiling that information, turning it into like a searchable database, and actively going to be sharing it out with different policymakers, funders, and philanthropy groups. Finally, I would say diverse products can be very important. As that first example showed, if all you were growing was bananas in 1914, you had a pretty rough time adjusting. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't grow just one. You shouldn't just grow 100 different things. Specialization can be very valuable, but only specializing can be rather brittle. So having diverse products, ensuring that you have diverse market outlets so that all of your eggs aren't in one basket, be that high-end, restaurants or hotels, or even direct to consumer, because it's very possible that a change in, say, stay-at-home orders or whatnot could disrupt even some of that direct to consumer work. So really diversifying your market outlets. And then when you're assessing market outlets that you want to push into, I would also advocate for finding diverse market segments, right? And so whether that's high-end, that's direct to consumer, sort of mid-level consumer, but then also finding market outlets that support lower-end purchasers who may be reliant on SNAP and EBT. And that ensures that, particularly since I would think that there has been and will probably continue to be a growth in that SNAP EBT user base here in the state, working with organizations that support them is going to be increasingly important to ensure the health and of your communities, but also of your farm. And with that, I think that's my time.
Hunter, thank you so much. That was so much good information. We really appreciate all of your mana'o, and feel free to throw Hunter some questions in there in that Q&A chat, and he can dive into some more things.
Thank you, Frankie. We will have to stay on track. I was just talking with mute on webinar, but we are going to have Matt Johnson joining us. He's the CEO of Oahu Fresh, a local food home delivery service that actually started in 2009, and we're going to be very impressed to see kind of how those numbers have skyrocketed during the response to COVID. So Matt also teaches at UH. He does an ag entrepreneurship program. He's worked with our network over the years, and we're gonna let him go ahead and share some mana'o with us. So thank you, Matt.
All right, there we go. Great, thanks India. And thanks everyone for hopping online here and checking in here. Yeah, lots going on with local ag, and yeah, it's just going to reiterate a lot of the good things that Donna and Hunter are already talking about. So as India said, I'm with Oahu Fresh, and we do mostly direct-to-consumer home delivery local food products, and we've been doing this for a while, but over the past few months, we've actually gotten a lot busier. There's been a lot more demand, mostly due to the stay-at-home orders, and there's been some articles written in some local publications. So it's just become a very popular, or there's just been a lot of demand for really the convenience. And I think people have been discovering even more so the good variety of really amazing food that is to offer. So we've really been pivoting ourselves really just to kind of change our whole game plan on how to meet the demand. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then yeah, kind of answer some of the questions for the group. So yeah, you go to the next slide. So yeah, it just kind of lists off what we do. So really our whole mission is to provide support to farmers and then provide local food to customers that want it. So really we try to work with farms with direct purchasing. We also help them with distribution, so we'll go to the farms, pick up their products, and deliver to wherever their markets are. We'll also do project grant management, ag business trainings, like I've actually done before with Frankie and Oahu RC&D. Probably met some of you through that before. And also too, looking for other avenues other than direct-to-consumer model, doing processing, doing value-add products, trying to find as many avenues as possible for produce. So yeah, I'll just kind of list some of the different things that we do. Go to the next slide. Yeah, just some pictures kind of showing what we do. So yeah, Csa Delivery, that's the main thing we're really doing now. In the past, we've done a lot more with restaurant sourcing, but that line of business has gone down. And then the farm distribution, where we'll take the farm's products to wherever their markets are. With some of the cold storage vehicles that we have, that's a resource that we can provide to our farm network. And then ag business development, doing great writing, helping farms access some of the mostly USDA or even local grant funding. And then yeah, this is a big thing that we're really kind of looking in the future. It's always been kind of the back of our mind, but doing more value add processing. I think there's a lot of potential in this. Anything from, this is a play on a baba ganoush that we're using off-grade eggplant, mostly from Ho Farms. And then we're able to sell that on our website, sell it in stores. But we're looking at having something as simple as chopped tomatoes or chopped mushrooms. So seeing a lot of potential growth. I think there's going to be a lot more demand for those type of things. So definitely recommend that to anyone out there to be thinking along those lines. A lot of times people think value added, it's got to be something very intense, but it could be something as simple as just chopping them up. Next slide. Yeah, it just shows some of the farms that we work with. So we're not a farm ourselves. So we have a network of probably about 15 to 20 farms. And what I like about our network is we work with some of the largest farms on the island, and then we work with some of the smallest farms as well. So we have a neat mixture, and especially with the way our orders are now, we're having to fill, we have different types of subscriptions. So we have like a farmer's market bag, which is just kind of a bag that we put together based on what's available. We're filling anywhere from 800 to 1,000 of those a week. So, we're having to look to some of the larger farms to help us fill those orders. But then we also have a make your own bag option where you can put different items in there where our customers can go online and choose and kind of build their own bag. And that's where we can put in, some of the farm's products that may have smaller quantities. All right, next slide. And we also have our kind of like what we call our add-on items. So once you have your produce bag, then we're also working with our local artisanal producers. So we're going to Shakamoa eggs. And we just started working with Open Kitchen, which is a catering company based out of North Shore at Waimea Valley. They started creating some different products. So we started adding their items onto our website. We also have that's Lauren with Ulumana. So we're part of the Oahu Food Hub, which is a space here for a variety of different food processors and aggregators. So we work a lot with the different producers out of our space here. So you can get Ulumana's chips and also their hummus off of our website, and a whole variety of a lot of other products as well. Next slide. Yeah, and this just kind of describes the Food Hub a little bit more. So this is a shared cold dry storage and also commercial kitchen space that's available for local food processors. And this is pretty neat. It's basically a co-working space, but for food processors. So we have probably about 6 or 7 different businesses in here right now. And we're actually hoping to maybe find a larger space because we're just kind of running out of room. Next slide. And so, yeah, so kind of talking about new partnerships and programs. So, yeah, with the past, 3-4 months, we've really had to pivot a lot. And with our increase in demand, we had to really kind of reach out for help. So with the home delivery, before COVID, we were doing about a total of 100 orders a week. Now we're doing anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 orders a week. And a lot of this is probably 3/4 of those orders are home delivery. So we only have one van right now. So what we end up doing to actually fulfill the deliveries is we partnered up with a catering company called Aloha Hospitality Group. So this is a company that had staff available for different events such as weddings, parties, whatnot. So they had a lot of staff, but they didn't have any events. So we came together and they provided their staff with their vehicles to help us with the deliveries. So that's how we've been fulfilling anywhere from 800 to 1,000 deliveries a week. So we've been really fortunate to be able to partner up with them. We have some new pickup locations. So not just home delivery, but also places where you can go and pick up your Oahu Fresh order. So partner up with Lanikai Brewery, Ala Moana Center, Kalapawai Deli, Pacific Club. And then also created a new product called Csa Box. And this is a partnership with Open Kitchen and Aloha Hospitality Group. It's kind of like a Hello Fresh or a Blue Apron type box where it's more of the prepared, cooked, ready to eat foods with produce in there as well. And then we also been working with Hawaii Farm Bureau where they've been contracting us to pick up produce from different farms and bringing it to different nonprofits for different meals programs. So yeah, just kind of show some of the numbers before COVID. Like I said, doing anywhere from 100 to 200 orders a week. And then post-COVID, yeah, since April, we've done over 20,000 different orders, 1,500 meal kits, 7,000 eggs. Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing, what we've been able to do. And like I said, a lot of this has been because of different partnerships that we put together. But it's also kind of, I hate to use the word exciting, but it kind of bust us into full gear. A lot of these ideas that we've had in the past, the things we wanted to do, we finally started doing, such as a quarantine cooking video. So partnered up with my good friend Andrea Bertoli that you can see on our IGTV. And this is a big thing with anyone who's doing CSA knows that there's really a lot of hand holding you have to do with the customers and a lot of educating to get them comfortable with cooking with different things that may be in their CSA box. So yeah, next, work on a new website, just make it a little more user-friendly. And as I mentioned too, looking to do more value-add production. I really think, this is, an area that anyone involved in local food should be looking at. The demand that we've seen is people want, convenience. They want to support local, but it's got to taste good, it's got to look good, and it's got to be convenient, especially now with people unwilling to, go out and shop as much. Yeah, so this is just kind of, some tips here and just things to be doing. A lot of different people have been come up with their own CSAs, which is great. I think there's a lot of different niches to be looking at. So this could be location. There isn't really, anyone doing a lot of North Shore. I think there's a lot of opportunities on North Shore of Oahu, but that's why I say like location. You could focus on a specific part of your respective island. Organic fruits, meats. You can make a box with all different kinds of combinations. A lot of different opportunity there. And like I said, lightly processed, chopping things, just having things ready to go and ready to eat type items, I think is going to become more and more popular as well. Just information how, if anyone's interested in working with us, if you are a producer, whether you're making a value add item or you have produce, we want to hear from you. So you can actually contact Anna, have her email address there. And yeah, preferably you already got certified. If you're not, we can work with you and put you in touch with some of our partners that can help you with that. So yeah,
Okay.
thanks so much, guys. Aloha.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the good support you offer our farmers. We do have a way to follow up with you, and I would encourage all those in our network to explore on Oahu what, how you can get in, how you can collaborate with other women farmers in our network to work with Matt, and then similar programs on your islands. We do have a really tight schedule. We're gonna have Jesse take us to the end, and then we won't have a time for a Q&A, but we do have some great questions we're gonna post on our website. We will be launching a poll afterwards, and we really ask everyone stay on if you can. Help us fill out those polls. It's how we kind of continue doing these. So we will give a last slide. We'll go a little over with that last slide of how you can follow up with everyone. But we're going to switch over to Jesse Cook. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us. He is Ulupono Initiative's Vice President of Investments and Analytics. As a Vice President, he provides financial and technical due diligence for investment decisions on various projects. So I think a lot of us are also big fans, of a lot of our panelists. I've also followed what Ulupono's been doing over the years. Jesse's main focus is to seek and support organizations working to increase local food production in the islands. So he does a lot of work crunching numbers, but he's also out there talking to farmers. He has a wealth of knowledge that he's going to share with us today. And Jesse, I'll let you go ahead and take it from there.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to, thanks everyone. I'll try and be quick. I know we have limited time. So our focus sectors here at Ulupono is local food, renewable energy, and transportation. Freshwater and waste management we do a little bit of, but not as much of a focus anymore. We're an impact investor. We do funding through grants or investments in companies. So quickly, our COVID response. As we all know, COVID led to the shutdown of the hospitality and restaurant industry, which then led to mass unemployment. And for farmers, most folks in the industry believe that there was a 50% decrease in sales in total throughout the industry. Some people experienced less, some people experienced more. We knew both the community and farmers were in a bad way March and April. And so we wanted to act quickly to get grant funding to programs that would help both people in need and at the same time struggling farmers that lost their markets. We also saw a need for capacity building because we knew that there were going to be federal programs on the way, and farmers are notoriously not great at paperwork and applying for these federal programs. So we wanted to put folks in place that could help with grant applications and loan applications and make sure that farmers were aware that there were programs. And sometimes it would be calling farmers up and saying, did you know about this? Did you apply about this? So far, we've put out $670,000 that's just for COVID-related grants. So we put out a lot of money, and really it's about stimulus. We wanted to get money into the hands of farmers quickly. So a lot of these programs were farm to food nonprofit programs where we granted money to folks like Aloha Harvest, Y&I Coast Comprehensive Health Center, Food Basket, where our money had to go for local produce. So those food banks would contract with farmers to give them food, which worked out. And we also did a program with Hawaii Farm Bureau, and Oahu Fresh was a partner on that program to get food to food banks. And this is very different for food banks. Food banks always do usually long shelf life canned goods and long shelf life goods. So relationships with farmers was brand new. So those supply chains had to be created from the start. And Matt at Oahu Fresh, along with the Hawaii Farm Bureau, helped to do that. So top challenges, I mean, you know, funding has always been a problem for farmers. Farming and ranching is seen as pretty risky. Not only do they have the regular business problems that all industries have, but then you got to worry about too much rain or too little rain and bugs. And bankers are very risk averse folks and don't understand bugs or the weather and can't foresee when it's going to be bad. So farming is always going to have a problem with financing. During COVID, there's been other concerns. You know, a lot of the state and county governments are scared of duplicative funding. They think the feds will come back and take away CARES funding or make the state refund them CARES funding if there is duplicative funding. And their interpretation has been pretty conservative. So, you know, an example would be if somebody got CARES funding to buy them food one day, and then they got CARES funding to buy them food the next week, is that duplicative? And the state and county are taking a very conservative interpretation of that. There's been restrictions and confusion in agriculture on whether ag industry basically qualifies for some programs. There was a lot of confusion with the PPP program that got finally cleared up, but precious time was wasted. Application requirements by the feds is usually their applications are a lot more paperwork and a lot more requirements, and farmers aren't good at paperwork. Something very frustrating for me is, you know, I've talked to farmers and saying, why aren't you applying for these funds? They're out there for you. And, you know, farmers, God bless them, say others need more help. And to me, that really irritates me, but at the same time, of course, it's very admirable. But farmers, everyone on the phone who is a farmer, needs to know that other industries and other businesses ain't going to have those sort of qualms. They're going to go for that free money. And farmers need to find out what's available and get to that money, because sooner or later there's not going to be much help. Structural things, you know, I think the number one thing that I see is lack of political unity. You know, there's been a lot of bad blood between conventional ag, non-organic, organic, non-GMO, GMO. All that takes away from farmers' ability to have any say in politics. And because farmers are financially weak and unable to give large campaign contributions, the only way a farmer and the industry is going to get heard is if they are unified and come together to figure out what's really important for the industry. Because right now, their politicians give a lot of lip service, but because there's no money coming from farmers and because farmers can't agree among themselves, it's going to continue to be an issue, and farmers aren't going to get the programs and policies they need. Other things here are, you know, high cost of inputs, the incomplete supply chain, food safety requirements. They've been increasing. I would say only 5% to 10% of farmers in Hawaii actually have regular business with large grocery stores because of the new food safety requirements. So a lot of farmers, mid-sized and small farmers, depended on the hotel and restaurant industry. And since that evaporated, that's where you get that huge sales drop off for farmers who are struggling right now. Workforce issues are always there. You know, the average farmer labor wage is $14 an hour, which beats minimum wage, but farming is very tough physically. You're out in the sun, so it's tough for farmers to be competitive in salaries. And farmers need to think of farming as a business, not as a lifestyle, to really figure out the numbers, to contact your customers, figure out what they need, what other suppliers and farmers are doing and not duplicate that just because you like growing it. So farming needs to be seen as a business. The last one is disconnect with consumers. Now, that's the one I'll expand on. Instead of disconnect with consumers, we thought of it when this started as disconnect with voters. And that's what consumers are. They're voters for the politicians. So we felt the crisis put local food security at the top of minds for voters, and that makes it at the top of minds for politicians. So our focus was to bridge that disconnect with consumers/voters, and it was a key part of our strategy. We wanted to bring media attention to local food production issues, and with that media attention comes government attention. And when you get that, then you have more government funding programs for farming. So we wanted to make sure that message was out there. And it's a really tough message for politicians to ignore when, the precariousness of our situation in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. At the same time, supply chains on the mainland were disrupted and continue to be disrupted. Pricing on meats and long shelf life goods went up, and all the while families are struggling to avoid hunger. So getting that story out there, it's very tough for politicians to ignore. And I think, when you look at the newspaper, there's always a great story about farming and food banks and hunger, and we wanted to make sure we pushed those stories from the very start. So in addition to the news articles we did in other media outlets, and we also helped others get their stories into the media, we started our own weekly farmer series, and really we just wanted to get more personalized stories about farmers and what they're going through during COVID and how they've had to adapt their operations to COVID, and also about their personality and their outlook on Hawaii and things like that. So please check out our weekly series. There's some interesting stories there. So, given there's a lot of penny pinching going on in the government, and it's because we're going to have budget shortfalls here. So it's going to be tough to get any programs through. So I don't know if I should call it biggest opportunities, but I would call it big opportunities that have a good chance of getting passed. And the reason we're saying that is because SNAP Double Up and DOE school meals have an element of federal reimbursement in it. So you can go to the state or counties and say, hey, if you fund this, we get double the money from the feds. So we're bringing money into the state. So we feel that it's a big chance. It might not be the biggest opportunity, of course, if you could say, oh, farmers should get free water and don't pay taxes, that's even better. But given the situation we're in, these are the programs we're really pushing on. So SNAP Double Up Bucks, the state only funded $100,000 this go around, whereas a state like Michigan put in $6 million into their SNAP Double Up program. DOE school meals, the local food content in DOE school meals is about 2 to 3%, which is ridiculously low. If we can put a state minimum on DOE school meals, that to about 25%, that would mean $11 million each year to local farmers. And we were part of several pilots that showed that you can put in much more local and actually save money. So it's not a question of pricing and money, it's the question of whether the government wants to really push and make things happen. So that's it.
Okay, Jesse, thank you so much. You really helped us really understand the importance of strategy there. So, we heard you really say that we need to put on our business hats as farmers. We need to connect with our customers, identify their needs, and we have gone over time. We will give a big mahalo to all of our panelists. If you'd like to turn your cameras back on, we do have a poll that, as we mentioned, this would really help us if you can take the time, is to measure kind of increased understanding. So some of the issues today, I'm sure you've all been grappling with, but there were so many good new information, and if we could capture that in this poll, it'd be great. As this poll's going on, we want to, also give a big mahalo to our sponsors. So we have, Women's Fund of Hawaii, Corteva, we have Atherton, Bear, ORC, D at Large, Wormsy. We would like to go ahead and switch to the next slide because we want to let you know that, you can go to our website to follow up. Frankie, could you go 2 slides prior just to kind of show some of the other offerings? So yes, you can join our directory once again. So that's a way that our Women Farmers Network, we can, we're going to have our directory of women owned and operated ag businesses for each island, each specialty. We're hearing that, having a consistent voice, having a unified voice is important, and we're hearing about strategy. So thank you for completing our poll. Please do visit our website. We have a Facebook group, and we will, we've captured all of your questions, and we will continue to answer those. The presentations and a recording of the webinar will be available on our website, the same place that you registered. So again, a big mahalo to all of our panelists, all of our attendees, and all of our sponsors for all of us coming together to make this happen. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. And thank you once again.